Coming up is my conversation with Jamie Marsland. Him and I discuss WordPress Core and its future development paths, as well as where full site editing is headed versus other products that currently exist on the market like GeneratePress, Bricks, and so on. We also chat about a couple of other interesting topics along the lines of risk management for us as agency owners, setting up our clients for success, and balancing the needs of clients when it comes to what they actually need versus the tools that we're putting them on. This is the first of many conversations I hope to have with Jamie. My name is Jonathan Jernigan. Welcome to Inside Link, and let's go ahead and get started. Well, it's a pleasure to finally connect with you. I know we've exchanged messages in the past. We're in a couple of groups together. And I think in a lot of ways, what we do and are interested in are very similar. You know, I'm not full FSE and that kind of thing like you are, but GeneratePress and Generate Blocks are my go-to.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to chat and, you know, talk shop, and especially since you got the Gutenberg situation behind you.
Yeah, hand drawn, I should say.
It's very nice.
It's like cheating, projected and hand drawn.
This whole time I thought it was a print.
Yeah, no, it's hand drawn. But you can see my kids have rubbed off. I've had to repair it over the years. This has been there, but it's still there. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I admire very much your office setup there. You got the fancy, like what looks like to me like the barn door, the cool lighting. You got the whiteboard.
I live in a fairly old house, so this, I guess, 1910. This house, something like that. And this was the garage, a converted garage. So this is out in the back garden. So I walk out my front door and to a back door, and I'm sort of 10 yards. I'm in here. So it's like a little sanctuary away from. Not so bad now because I got two of my daughters at university, but in the early days of the business, it was like, you know, a place you could work for quiet. I used to work in London, which is like a 2.5 hour drive away, and then Oxford. So lots of commuting in my past corporate life. So this is definitely from a lifestyle point of view.
You can keep the coffee in one hand all the way to your office now.
It's incredible. I look back, you know, so I've been running this business for about 13 years, I suppose. But before that, I was always commuting for the last sort of 7 years of those sort of corporate life. And, you know, 5 hours a day commuting wasn't unusual. And you just look back and think, my goodness, what an incredible waste of time.
Yeah.
It's just mad, you know.
Did you at least get a train, or were you driving?
Yeah, I would get a bit of both, but mostly when we bought a business in London for the last company, and that was a train. So it was civilized, but it was still, you know, 4 or 5 hours commuting a day with young kids at home. And you just look back and think, well, that's a colossal waste of time if you're like, there you go. You go through it.
Massively, definitely. Yeah. So you've been in WordPress, did you say 13 years?
This business has been going for about, I think, 13 years. We just passed 13 years, something like that. So a long time. I've been there. And then before that, I've been using WordPress and trying to push it into one of the businesses I was running. So I've been aware of WordPress for a long, long time.
That's fantastic. And then now you both develop products, you use it, and of course create content on it.
Yeah.
Well, your plugins are focused around WooCommerce, is that right?
Yeah. So mostly WooCommerce. So I have a plugin called Gutenberg Pro, which is not WooCommerce based. It's just based on extending the core. So it doesn't add any blocks into the block editor. It just extends the core blocks to let people do things more easily with Gutenberg. So it's kind of the opposite of a lot of plugins in that it's not trying to add complexity into Gutenberg. It's trying to make. I have a strong belief that. See, my background in WordPress is my life is filled with people that are coming to WordPress. Either they have sites that they can't manage anymore. They had sites built for them. And I'm talking about over the years, because I used to traipse around the country training people face to face. So I've seen the whites of people's eyes. And I think I've trained about 5,000 people face to face over, you know, hard miles, traveling around London and Scotland and Cardiff and some other places in the UK. Anyway, so and my life has been full of seeing people who have ended up with sites that they can't manage. You know, I would say 95% of the people that come on my training courses are people that are fed up with sites that they're stuck with that have been developed in such a way that they can't actually move them forward. So how did we get to that? Yeah, so that's been sort of my experience of that particular bit of WordPress market about making life easier for people who aren't necessarily professionals of their field, but they have businesses and they don't have much time, but they want to use WordPress as a tool so they can, make their businesses more money. And so that's the focus. That's how I got to it. That was the focus of that plugin, trying to make Gutenberg more easily. And I still think there's a massive market opportunity for somebody to take it the next step further of simplicity with Gutenberg, especially with FSE.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because that's a core focus for me inside of my own business, is keeping things as simple as possible. And for many years I used Oxygen, and it's great. It's a powerful tool, and I still have many sites in it, and there are things about it that I do still very much love and admire. But with what some people would consider the restrictions of the block editor, I find it not only makes it more pleasurable for me to work in, and then I have an overseas contractor. He works in it with me as well. But for the few clients that I have that get in it, I had a client just recently built a website for that had never used WordPress before.
Yeah.
And he was like, wow, this is incredible. And never would I even conceive of letting a client into an Oxygen website.
Yeah.
And so anyway, long story short.
I think that's a really interesting point, because there was a thing that blew up last week with the Brits community, and I don't want to get into the details of it particularly, but well, we can do. But I was trying to fathom in my mind where tools like that are positioned, what particular, and I get the appeal of them, and I think they're great tools for what they do. But if you just sort of step back and go from a market point of view, you wouldn't use it in an enterprise market. Like the guys at Human Made wouldn't use a page builder because, well, one, these are small companies at the moment. An enterprise isn't going to use, a serious enterprise isn't going to use a tool that's, built by a team of 2 people. They're just not going to do that from a risk analysis point of view. A DIY is probably not going to use that tool because it's too much of a steep learning curve. An agency would use that tool, but only if the DIYer wouldn't ever want to change their website. So you have to come back to the agency to actually make those changes. Because I ran a few polls last week just for fun, and people were fairly clear that they wouldn't ever want their users to go into Bricks to make changes. So then you're faced with the market, the sort of concentric circles of where that market is for a tool like that become very niche, and fantastic for that niche, but it's a very niche use case if you're going to. I don't quite understand the market proposition for tools like that going forward when Gutenberg is maturing, really.
Yeah, I have to agree to a large extent. I mean, the vast majority, I think, are freelancers and agencies that are building sites for small businesses. I would imagine the vast majority of these clients are probably a few employees or less, maybe up to 10 or 15. But even those kinds of sites feels like building with Bricks or Oxygen is like drinking from a fire hose. The tool is just so overpowered for what you're doing. And with a large majority of the sites that I used to build are these custom directory websites for homeowners associations and for organizations that had online courses and memberships of some description. And at that time it was like, wow, Oxygen's conditions and some of the custom controls in it allowed me to do those things. But like you just said, as the block editor has matured, I've been able to build those exact same things in the block editor with Generate Blocks and of course Nick Diego's block visibility plugin.
Yeah.
Those 2 plugins alone allow me to do exactly the same things that those other tools do, maybe with some minor differences. I'm sure there will be plenty of people that will argue otherwise.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I think where the use cases for Bricks and Oxygen, and obviously there's going to be different. We're generalizing here, and there's going to be different use cases and why people love it. But it seems to be the use cases are where the agency is in full control of that customer's marketing, and they completely control the design, and they wouldn't want the customer to ever change that design, and the customer's happy potentially coming back to them to make any sort of small changes because they have this trusting relationship with the agency. But I have to say, over my 13 years of running WordPress, I've seen so many customers that haven't been happy with that relationship. You know, they've fallen out with the agency and they're stuck with a site that they can't change because of the way it's been built. Or the agency has fallen out with them and there's been a contractual, and now they've got this site that they don't know how to untangle. I've had agencies where the person's died, for goodness sake. You know, that's happened on more than one occasion. So, you know, my background is selling quite high value, you know, pre this business, quite high value enterprise solutions into companies. And, you know, technical debt is a big part of that process. You know, using off the shelf products is kind of drilled into me from an early age. And lots of the things I'm seeing in the sort of WordPress market I wouldn't personally advocate using because of not the tools are great. It's more of the other factors that I think a lot of customers, you know, don't consider and probably should be educated on. You know, if you go to a customer and say, do you know what happens if you do activate this plugin? Do you want to change your website in 6 months' time? Do you know the migration path for this? There's not really, because of the nature of the customer, that's not in there. They're not thinking about that sort of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's a huge gap I think it's a big issue for WordPress because we've got lots of customers out there with a bad experience of WordPress. And I'm a bit like, you know, you heard the story about the Queen when she was alive. She always thought toilets smelled of paint because every toilet she went to had been freshly painted. My experience is a bit like that. So I only see, I see a lot of customers with unhappy situations with their websites where they're being charged lots of money to make tiny little changes to their site. So my viewpoint is definitely skewed towards that, but I do think it's an issue.
How is the experience for a customer when using the full site editing experience? Because even, you know, for me and others that are reasonably adept at WordPress, it feels overwhelming. And I think a lot of what we would consider rudimentary and sort of essential capabilities of a product like FSC out of the box versus something like GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks. It's like it feels like you have to do a lot to make it work and usable. But at the same time, I also think that there is an element of that for a tool like Bricks and Oxygen. You have to do a lot to make it efficient and easy to use for you as the developer. So I guess in a way, my question is slightly skewed because you sort of have to do that no matter where you go.
Well, I think your point is good. I don't think you'd have to do that in, well, maybe not so much GeneratePress, but let's say you're using Cadence. Hugely popular. You know, I ran a course today, actually. I can give a group of beginners, you know, quick demo of the customizer in Cadence, literally like a 10-minute lesson, and they're off and running. And they're customizing their site and they're changing fonts and they're changing the header layout. You just can't do that in full site editing at the moment. So even though I'm a huge proponent of full site editing, it's the number one issue. I think they need to focus, you know, if I was running, and I'm having conversations with people that are running the dev team, if I was running the dev team, I would say, right, by this time next year, it needs to be as easy to use as a classic theme. And then you'll start to see, you know, kind of the growth rate. I've been tracking the growth rate of these things, and it's currently, I think last month was about 9% or something like that, the growth rate month on month. But that's you know, there's no point in full site editing if it's going to be as complex to use as Bricks.
Yeah, I guess where is the balance there of capability versus complexity? That's a very tricky one.
Well, they built the capability. The capability is all there. So it's like, you know, you can, it's got the theme builder, you can customize WooCommerce, you've got global styles, you've got block locking API, you've got it's kind of all the plumbing's been done, but the UI is kind of, it's hard. Yeah.
So there's in my brief explorations of it, there was a lot of stuff that I had to go activate in, is it theme.json? Is that the right place where you can go and like?
Yeah, but that's your theme. So if you're using, if anyone's watching this, go and set up a site on InstaWP, download 2024, because 2024 theme has pretty much got everything switched on for you straight away. So you wouldn't have to go into theme.json. Theme.json is just like a configuration file. It does a number of things. It curates the one of the most important things, it turns on and off options in Gutenberg, which is cool. But it also means you'll have this disparity between certain themes. So some themes you'll see some options, and other themes you might not see some options. But 2024 has pretty much everything you're going to need.
That's similar to a lot of classic themes where you could switch between themes, and it's like, well, this has X, Y, and that one has Z.
Yeah, I mean, one of the huge benefits of FSC is that you're going to use, every theme starts at the same level, right? So you have a theme, every single WordPress block theme has a theme builder. Every single WordPress block theme has global styles. Every single WordPress block theme has the style book. So it's like there will be huge advantages because you're going to have this unified UI in block themes, but they need to nail the learning curve, you know, because conceptually it's a much more, because I run block theme courses as well. It's a really hard course to write and to run because you've got these different concepts that people have to try and understand, like templates, template paths, patterns. Even the idea of templates, people, you know, that's an education for people. They don't realize WordPress is a template-based system. So there needs to be some abstraction of some of this complexity for DIYers.
So that's
which might be anyway. Yeah, and that's why, you know, that's what I'm pushing for in all my conversations with people.
That's one of the reasons why I love GeneratePress so much, is the elements feature allows you to do essentially anything with any template.
Yeah.
And it's just so simple. And incredibly powerful, the combination of the templates and the hooks that GeneratePress offers. So I'm curious, like, you know, with you mentioning the themes all kind of having the same baseline.
Yeah.
If I switch to Cadence, for instance, instead of GeneratePress, my site is essentially broken. And if I switch from Oxygen to Bricks or Bricks to GeneratePress, the same is true. Every one of those leaps, your site is horrendously broken.
Yeah.
So you mentioned technical debt. Is that something that FSC helps maybe not alleviate entirely, but reduce? Can you switch theme to theme and still maintain a semblance of a functioning website?
Yeah, it'll completely function. The bit that isn't nailed yet is it doesn't translate. So let's say you edited your single post template in 2024 and switched to Ollie. You would get the 20, at the moment, I'm pretty sure you would get the Ollie single post template. It wouldn't translate your pattern across, your template across.
And then
like that, but you might, you know, it's fairly easy to fix that problem.
Yeah, that is definitely intriguing. It's difficult to spend the time thinking backward a little bit, I was thinking, like, people feel so strongly about their tool and it becomes such a almost vitriolic conversation when somebody proposes something different, which is a bit of a shame that, you know, we can't talk tools. I don't think it's necessarily unique to this particular ecosystem. I mean, I'm really into cars, and, you know, car guys can be super vicious, you know, so it's the same kind of thing. Ford versus Chevy and all those different kinds of brand associations.
I think it's a male thing probably as well, right?
Yeah, to some degree, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
Did you post on Twitter or X, whatever it is, today, and say something along the lines of, like, focusing on something about ignoring the negatives and keeping in your lane, something to that effect? Maybe it wasn't you.
Yeah, no, not today, not me. I posted a lot last week when the brick stuff was going off. But
gosh, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Really, like, I don't know. That was a tough thing. I should have reached out to you and just expressed, you know, some condolences, because, man, I was watching that from afar, just being like, good God, how, I don't know. Just so crazy. It makes me not want to even participate. I don't participate in that community, but even more so, I just want to take another step back. Yeah,
it's insane. I mean, it's a very toxic atmosphere in there. So I've left the group, and I've blocked some of the more toxic people from my. It's just, you know, it's a good tool, and the developers are cool guys, but the sort of toxicity around the community is it's not helpful for them, honestly. Long term, it's not good for their brand. So actually, Thomas reached out to me, which was kind of cool. So I had a few conversations with him. I'm sure he's aware of what's going on.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that did build in the Oxygen community as well. You know, when I was heavily in it, I'd be in that group multiple times a day, and that attitude started to build. And I used to think that it might have been a top down problem, and clearly that's not quite the case, because Thomas does not have the same outward persona that some others do. So
Yeah. Well, I actually had a few people reach out to me privately and say they were nailed by the Oxygen community as well. So, but a lot of those people have kind of moved. I don't know the psychology of it. It's a very strange thing, you know, that how people get so offensive, defensive, and then offensive, then plain nasty, personal, and rude over a page builder. I mean,
Yeah.
as well, right? Is you're using a page builder. You're literally using a page builder. You know,
Yep.
you're not like developing the stuff from scratch. You're
No.
using a tool to help you build a website and getting defensive over using a page builder. It's like, and then taking the high moral ground because you're some kind of developer. It's like a very strange hill to sort of shout loudly from my
It's
point of view.
it's a really good reminder to hear you say that, because essentially it's just a wrapper on top of, I think it's written in Vue or something like that. So it's a
Right.
JavaScript framework that's building the HTML for you. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you can click the right button.
I mean, when I first introduced WordPress to my business a long time ago, my team of developers hated me, you know, because it was WordPress and it was a blog, and you know, and then WordPress started to rule the world. So now we've got people using page builders that are suddenly, you know, the cream of the crop. You're using a page builder on top of WordPress. You know, let's get some reality to the situation.
Well, it's funny you say that, because one of my close friends is the best developer I know. He's just exceptional. He's a React developer, and he knows zero about WordPress. And it's like he could build anything, and he does. He works for a company that builds software for airlines, and it's like,
Okay,
you know,
that's important.
To be that caliber, you know, he probably makes triple what you and I make combined.
Yeah.
And the fact that he knows zero about WordPress is just so interesting. When he told me that, you know, I was like, yeah, I know WordPress. He's like, what framework do you use? And I was like, nothing. I'm like, I'm just a little, I used to joke with my buddy Taylor that I just know the right buttons to click. It's like, I'm not, it's not the same thing. And it's so strange, because the thing I think people forget, and especially when I saw the kind of attacks on you last week, is I was like, there's real people behind this that all have the same motivations and the same desires as every one of us. And I don't know, it's keyboard warrior attitude for sure.
Yeah.
But I was just so disappointed to see the way that thread devolved. I saw it initially and came back to it probably 24 hours later and was just like, oh man, it's just so gross and nasty. So that was part of the reason why I wanted to reach out.
I read one snippet of it and then I left the group, and I asked my friends not to share any more information about it, because it was just plain, you know, plain nasty stuff.
Yeah. Well, so moving on from that, more positive, more positive notes. You've spent a lot of time lately publishing block theme. You know, I said things, sounded like I said themes, but you've had what was it, TechCrunch website review?
Yeah.
That was super cool. And then Matt shared that. I was curious, you being more heavily involved in this FSE and block themes seems to be opening up a lot of interesting doors for you. You mentioned you're having conversations with the development team.
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah. So I think there's two approaches you can take with content. There's one, you can sit there and tell people what they should be doing, or you can sort of demonstrate stuff and show people in a fun way what's possible. So I've done this series of videos where I recreate famous websites, highly edited. So they're quite short and sharp things. It's not just me fumbling around for an hour. It's like, you know, 10 minutes, I'm going to recreate TechCrunch, or I've done Harry Styles' website, Taylor Swift, Tom Cruise. So I take a famous website and basically rebuild it in WordPress in about 10 minutes. So it's generally just using core Gutenberg blocks. Okay. And it kind of came out from the fact that I get a bit annoyed because I keep on people. I guess I started the channel looking back thinking there was a lot of people saying what wasn't possible with Gutenberg. You know, you couldn't build a website with it. It's not a page builder. And so you just, well, okay, that's fine. That's your opinion. But here's a website I've built with it. Here's a, you know, here's a fairly complex website that you've built with it. No plugins, just core WordPress. So, and subsequently, you know, I did this video with my daughter, one of my daughters, where I gave her 10 tasks to 10 to try and accomplish in Cadence, 10 to try and accomplish in a block theme. And the block theme she really struggled with. And I've had feedback from the Core Gutenberg team that they've been watching this stuff, right? So my daughter is influencing the development of a tool that's running 42% of the internet. You know,
That's actually a very fascinating look into it. I think having that outsider perspective and somebody who's brand new to it, I mentioned this already, that I've had a bit of resistance to it because there's a lot of muscle memory in the way that I do things without the FSC approach and just core Gutenberg. So that's very, very interesting.
Yeah, it's been really cool. And I think one of the messages I wanted to also get across this year is, you know, one of the differences with WordPress over other tools is that people can have influence. You know, I'm just a guy that has a plugin business and does some videos, and yet some of this, I'm now having conversations about helping steer the project. And I don't think people realize, you know, that's why I get a bit annoyed with people when they're just constantly criticizing from the sidelines. Well, you can get involved. You've actually got a tool here where you can actually influence the thing and steer the direction. So rather than just carping constantly about how bad it is, why don't you create some content, get involved, get some influence? You know, it's an amazing thing that most people don't realize about WordPress, that you can get involved in it. You know, it's incredible.
I guess in some ways it feels out of reach. Like thinking about from my own perspective, it's like this project feels so massive, and especially someone like me that I consider myself about this much of a developer, looking at the skills and the talent that is on that team, and just feeling out of touch with it. So, you know, it's a good reminder, because I came away from WordCamp US this year feeling like kind of disappointed in some of the talks, and I made a video on this, and I said,
I watched.
Yeah, okay. So I said, I think the only way to help create this is to get involved. So I applied to be a speaker at WordCamp Europe this year. Well, I guess it will be next year, as of right now, but in June of 2024. Of course, I don't know yet if they'll accept me, but just a small little step towards taking action on something that we feel is important. So yeah, I think that's a great way to do it.
I think there is people feel a lack of agency in it. And I get that, because I haven't done anything for it for 10 years. You know, I just sat there from the sidelines, just accepting this thing coming my way.
Yeah.
And I'm not like highly involved, but I'm now trying to help put some of my videos on the WordPress Learn site. So you've got my TechCrunch videos on there, and another one's in production to go on the Learn WordPress site. And other conversations are happening, because I haven't felt a sense of agency in the project at all. But it is possible to do it in whatever way. And you're not always going to be listened to. You know, I've applied to speak at all the WordCamps, haven't been accepted in a single one of them. It's not always going to happen, but there is a community of people where you can get involved in it.
That's good to know. I certainly
don't worry about the failure that's coming your way.
Yeah. Well, I also assumed that there may be a bit of doubt cast my way living in the US and applying to WordCamp Europe. They might just be like,
I see. Yeah.
The likelihood of there being a flight issue or any number of things like that would go wrong.
What's your topic?
I wanted to do it on creating a plugin. So, you know, I'm still very new at it, but with the PyCalendar plugin that we've created, it's growing slowly but surely. And I just thought it feels daunting to create a plugin for the very first time, but the positive impact that I can see it has, especially for agency owners who might be in kind of that feast or famine of project work that I feel like I've been in for so many years. I can see this tiny little tool blossoming into something much more. So that's kind of the idea, is using digital products to kind of grow your agency.
And that's on WordPress.org, right?
Yeah.
And have you been surprised by the lack of tooling that you get on WordPress.org to help you as a plugin author?
Yeah. And the rudimentary nature of even updating it. I had to create like a 9-step checklist, and I have to go reference it every time to to go just simply update the plugin. And every time I'm scared. I'm like, if I screw this up, this is so bad. We only have at this time like 300 active users on the plugin, but it's like that's 300 websites or more that we could screw up. So
yeah, I mean, the last few plugins I've released, I've only released them as premium only, not on WordPress.org because of some other stuff happened, but just because you feel like out of control on it. So I was actually going to make a video which was how to fix, I can't remember, it was a fairly clickbaity title. It was going to be, 10 ways to fix WordPress. And one of those was going to be, show some love to the plugin developers because, the stats are dreadful. The experience, what you could do with a platform like that is incredible. So there's lots to do.
There's the platform itself is wild. Like when I look at some of the other large plugins out there that have hundreds of thousands or millions of installs, it's like pretty staggering. And the analytics is so rudimentary.
Yeah.
The graph barely works to show you, the downloads per day, and that's about all you get. It's kind of crazy. You're just essentially taking stabs in the dark, like wondering how does a plugin rank in the search results. It's like, well, I don't really know, but the only thing that seems like matters is install count and review quantity. It's like, other than that,
updating, a lot of people, I haven't looked at this stuff deeply for a while, but I think updating regularly, I see people doing that as plugin authors, like, to a crazy amount. So I guess the algorithm did that at some point. But it's just you end up playing this terrible game, and I'm playing enough terrible games with other things that I didn't want that pain. So
yeah. So all of your plugins then are premium only.
No, we have a few still on WordPress.org, but the majority of new ones have just been premium only. Just because I can control, like I use Freemius, and I know that Freemius gets a lot of. Some people really don't like it in certain communities again, but you can do amazing things, right? You get amazing stats. You can do staged rollouts. So that's just phenomenal. So I can say, right, I'm going to do a new release. I'm only going to release it to 15% of people. I've done all my testing, but let's see for real in the wild. So it's got some amazing stuff in there that, imagine if you had that in WordPress.org, staged rollout.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome.
I just can't imagine, like, for a plugin that has tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of installs, like you said, if you're pretty sure, but like, for instance, we just released an update that was totally sound, except if you put a negative number in this field, which of course you should never do, breaks your whole site. And it's like, I would have never, ever, ever thought about that, but it was uncovered immediately. Somebody just accidentally did that, and it took me a while to figure it out. But luckily, we don't have that many installs.
You have 5 million installs, and somebody's livelihood based on it.
Yeah. Well, actually, that goes back to an even more interesting point that I wanted to touch on. Was you mentioned these enterprise projects are not going to be using the vast majority of these tools. They just cannot. They can't base their website, and their online presence on these third-party tools. And at WordCamp US this year, there was a fascinating talk from NASA, and almost the entire website is custom. Nearly everything. It's like there's a block theme, and they're building their own custom blocks, and that's it. They're using like SEOPress, I think.
Okay.
And there was a couple of other weird plugins. You're just like, you picked those? Huh, interesting. But I found that really interesting. And an organization of that size, of course, one of the probably largest entities in the world in terms of reach, they didn't use anything like that. It's so interesting. So I'm slightly. I'm
actually going to recreate the NASA website. I'm doing a special video for, who is it? Anvata, I think, on their channel. So they've asked me to recreate the NASA website. So that'll be fun. I mean, it looks fairly standard when I look at it. It doesn't look anything terribly complicated from a Gutenberg point of view.
They talked about merging like some unbelievable number of websites into one. They had all these subdomains, and they were trying to kind of consolidate all of them together.
Yeah.
It was, from a technical point of view, it was very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And it just wanting more detail. That's kind of what I mentioned. Wanting more detail on that. Like that could have been an entire series of workshops on the bidding process and how they determined what software to use. How did they pick all these different things? There's so many components.
Yeah, I think it's a huge gap in the WordPress agent. I mean, I don't know. I'm generalizing again, but it feels like a huge gap in from what I see the agency market in terms of that. From what I see, again, I'm not I'm not slandering agencies, but from the experience that I see, there seems to be a huge, and actually you see it in content as well, a huge focus on the tooling. Like so many people clash over page builders. But then you ask them about, technical debt, training costs, migration path, all that stuff. It just doesn't, there's just no content out of that, about that. And for me, that sort of macro stuff is kind of the most important stuff when you're doing projects for customers. Are they going to be able to use this thing in a year's time? What's the support cost? What happens if you die? There's lots of questions.
Well, I mean, that goes back to the kind of, what am I trying to say? Like the way that certain groups of people purport themselves to building the most, adept, whatever terms you want to use, websites out there. But then the only way forward is essentially to rip the carpet out and start anew. And that's every 3 years or every 5 years. It seems like there's no way to evolve the website rather than it just being a complete ground up rebuild.
Yeah. And I think at the moment with Core developing so quickly, and I think we've got a team in place at the moment. You just go through some of the guys working on the project, like Nick and Rich and James Kemp has gone to work at WooCommerce. You've got this amazing team of people in place that we're going to see some, and I interviewed Matthias the other day, the lead. We're going to see some amazing stuff from the project. So however much where you think it's not where it needs to be, the team is in place. There is massive investment going into it, trust me. And you have to make a fairly strong strategic decision not to be aligned to that direction. You have to be fairly, that is a fairly big decision if you're an agency not to follow that direction. The economic drivers are so strong at the moment, and the team's in place that, and it's fine if you want to make that decision, but I think eyes open, that's where it's going.
Block visibility is such a fantastic plugin that if that level of competence and thoughtfulness is where Core is headed, that for me is a very compelling reason. Like I don't know Nick. I reached out to him hoping to bring him on the channel as well. And if that quality of development and, like I said, thoughtfulness is coming, then it makes sense to be even closer to Core. That was a large reason why I jumped ship from Oxygen to Generate, was really just the idea of closing that gap a little bit. I'm obviously not quite there yet, but there is something to be said. I do not a lot, but I do some of the kind of monthly recurring websites where you're just on a basic subscription for maintenance and updates. And what I want to introduce is getting like a refresh, a fresh coat of paint every 18 months or 24 months, and not having to redo the whole thing, kind of giving it a facelift in that time. So, if what you're talking about is coming, that seems compelling.
It's just a question of speed, I guess, because again, it's one of the complexities. I've seen some of this stuff working in the trying to help in the sort of training bit of the project. Just the working in an open source project environment is very, very different to, if you want to add a feature to your plugin, you just do it. It's very, very, very different trying to operate. You can't just pull a lever up here and something squirts out the other end in the way you want it. So it's just, for me, the question is around how fast can they iterate on this stuff. They've definitely got the right people. I like the direction it's going in. So it just needs to speed up.
With that in mind, I guess that's a really important question: is how aware is this team you've mentioned of the complaints people have? Do they agree? Do they see the complaints? Are they justified? And is it being taken into consideration? Like, where there's a vocal minority of people that say it's absolutely garbage and trash and it's worthless and there's all these problems with it. Is there any credence put on that? And kind of, you were more on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like, what are they prioritizing? And it seems like if you go to the GitHub repo, it's overwhelming. You can't even it's just like too much. How do you even begin to prioritize what needs to be done?
So I think we'll just pick off two of the biggest issues that people complain about. One is responsiveness, right? And the kind of approach of intrinsic design. I genuinely think there is an awareness that there needs to be more tooling in Gutenberg to help people. what that looks like, they're cautious about, and I think they're right to be cautious about it, because once you stick it in there, you can't. You'll probably find this out. You can't take functionality away from people. They hate you forever. So you have to be very sure about what you put in. And what we can't have is Bricks Builder, for all its loveliness, you can't have Bricks Builder as the interface to Gutenberg. WordPress wasn't designed. You can't just throw the CSS spec at a thing and say, well, we'll have everything. That doesn't seem a good solution for most people. But they are aware that there needs to be more tooling around, potentially, the group block and the columns block, which is where a lot of this stuff. The group block uses Flexbox, so if you know a bit of CSS, you can get in there and do stuff anyway. But they are aware of that, and they are listening to that. And I did an interview with Matthias, lead architect, last week, which I hope, if I get time to edit, I'll come out this week, and he's very aware of that. So they are definitely actively thinking about how they can improve that. And the same with, they're very, but what happens out of that is kind of, people can be involved in that discussion. That is, there are discussions going on in GitHub. But it won't be to the level of, you're going to have, my understanding, you won't have, different responsive breakpoints options at the top of Gutenberg. I don't see that happening. I think they'll try and keep it as lightweight as possible. So possibly on the blocks that really need it, maybe you'll have some options. And then there's a few other things as well, but they're definitely aware of it and listening.
So who is really, actually driving the decisions forward? Like, there's this team of developers, there's a community conversation, but
it's a great question.
How does the this is what we're doing stamp get put on it?
Well, I don't think they have that. I think, Matthias is technical lead, so any big decisions will go past Matthias, right? He's the guy that's leading the project. And I asked him that exact question. I did get an answer. But then there is a lot of, people are free to get to, so you could come up with an idea, and you're free then to develop that idea and get other people involved in that idea. And if it starts to get traction, then it'll start to be, so it's a very organic and not a normal approach to how you would, not the opposite of the way we would approach plugins in our own businesses. But yeah, it's almost like you get, it's almost like the Hunger Games. You get fans for your idea, and then it bubbles up, and then you get people involved, and then you're in kind of that process of getting it merged into the plugin. And then if it works in the plugin, it might go into core at some point. So it's quite an organic approach, but there are some kind of high level architectural decisions that the interview I've done is it's a good interview, actually. I've got a lot of insight into some of the decisions, and the decisions from my feeling were they're all based on good thinking. Yeah, the longevity of content, the longevity of Gutenberg. So, I do have high levels of confidence that we're going to get the tooling, most of the tooling we need, probably.
So
it won't be what some people are screaming for, though. It'll be a lighter weight version of that.
Interesting. How I think in terms of my mental spectrum, we have where FSE and the block editor sits now in terms of core. We have something like GeneratePress and GenerateBlocks, which is kind of that happy medium.
Yeah.
Then we have something on the opposite end of the spectrum, like Bricks and Oxygen. Where in that spectrum do you think we'll end up long term?
That's a great question. I think it has to end up. I don't know where core will end up, actually. I don't know. My hope is it will end up sort of as easy as GeneratePress, as easy as a classic theme. I think that has to be, it has to disrupt its own market. Otherwise, you see the big difference from my point of view with block themes to Gutenberg, as in, if you just looked at them as products, Gutenberg, people had no choice. I mean, they could have used the classic editor and they can use other page builders, but you get it as default. It's the thing that comes with WordPress. Block themes have a competitor, and those are called classic themes. So people now there is a market battle, whether we admit it or not, between block themes and classic themes. And if the amount of work that's gone into block themes, if you just look at the GitHub tickets and the amount of development that's gone into it, it's absolutely, I'd love to know, if you put a cost around that, what that would be. It would be absolutely astronomical. It'd be huge. this thing has to work. Block themes have to basically, in my head, they have to compete with and be better than these things. Now, at the moment, these things are still easier to use than block themes. And if you want the block themes to really start to gain traction, they have to become both more powerful, and at base level, they are more powerful than the average classic theme, because out of the box, you get a theme builder and you get all this, you can edit templates directly. And, you know, there's some classic themes that are very powerful, but the majority of classic themes, a block theme is more powerful, but they are definitely harder to use. So that for me is the number one, it's the biggest issue. I think if I was running that team, I say we've got to crack that. That's our whole focus. Forget doing a new form block. Forget blah, 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 blah. We've just got to make it as easy as a classic theme to use. And then we've got a fighting chance of starting to get more traction on them. Until they do that, well, a few things might happen. One is people will fill that space probably, I imagine, with creating easier versions of block themes. So I do think there's a big opportunity for product people out there to almost build like an abstraction on top of block themes. So you can imagine like a hybrid theme, but instead of in a hybrid theme, you can choose to use the, you say, I'm going to use the template part for my header. You might have a first interface, which is a bit like a cadence, which is you've got some presets, but actually you've got a little pro option on there that says, let's go pro. And that kicks you into editing the template directly. But you've got this first layer for beginners, which is like, can't go wrong. So I think that might be, people might fill that space as well.
How do you have any visibility into the types of people that are coming to WordPress? Because clearly there is a huge, upward trend of WordPress adoptions. Wasn't it? I forget the exact time frame, but not that long ago, WordPress was like 34% of all websites, and now it's 42 or 43. Like, it's a massive number of growth.
Yeah.
In a very short period of time. So I guess my question is, do you have visibility into the types of people coming to the product? Are they
hard to get at? It's hard to get at. So, I mean, in my simple mind, you split it between agencies and DIYs. Is that what you're getting at? Sort of.
Yeah.
I've asked some hosting companies this, and they don't have the numbers. I've done some polling. And it depends which group you ask. My sense is DIYs are driving a lot of the. If you just look at what's happening out in the world, DIYs are going to be driving a lot of the growth of this stuff. Agencies obviously have a big market, but DIYs are going to be growing. They're the big market opportunity, I think, going forward. So, that's why it needs to be, as simple to use as imagine if a block theme was as simple to use as designing in Canva, for example. I mean, that would just be, incredible. You've got this abstraction which people can, just the idea that we have when we just, for my daughter's designing, say my daughter wants to build a website and she wants to put two elements on a page. The thought of having to add a column before I put stuff in the page is like, well, why would I do that? Why do I need to do that? Can't I just, and it happens magically, So I think there's a big opportunity in that space. I think there's a huge opportunity for somebody if they want to develop, and all the page builders and all the WordPress plugins at the moment are in the complex space, Breakdance, Quickly, they're all in the developer space. There's nobody that's really, in my head, going for and they all scorn Gutenberg because it's too simple to use or it's not enough. I think Gutenberg's too hard to use. I think there's a big opportunity in the beginner space to create something incredibly simple. Like Canva has a website builder, which is pretty cool, based on CSS Grid, and you just drag and drop stuff on it.
As though it was a Figma canvas. You put something where you need it to go, and then it just interprets that.
Yeah, and it's pretty good. At the moment with Canva, you can only build a one-page website. It would be good enough if that was in Gutenberg for 90% of beginners.
Joe the plumber.
He doesn't want to add a column before he do things next to each other. He just wants to put the two things next to each other, right?
It's interesting because people would then argue, well, Joe the plumber doesn't need to be in his own site. And that's a large, we already talked about this a bit, but that's a huge argument that people make. They shouldn't be in their site. They'll screw it up.
let me ask you this, right? So when Joe the plumber is doing his social media, is Joe the plumber going to a social media expert to design all the social media posts?
Probably not, because he can't afford it.
Of course not. You know, but and somehow we think that websites are somehow sacrosanct. That Joe the plumber isn't professional. He can't do it. But he's off. He's off putting Instagram posts on every 10 minutes. You know, and social media is for a lot of businesses is more impactful than a website these days.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's an element too of like people say people love for anything tech, whether it's IT or web or whatever. Oh, I couldn't do what you do. Meanwhile, they're like a criminal law attorney. Well, it's like, well, that that's your discipline. This is mine,
Yeah.
and there's that kind
And
of back and
there's,
forth.
there's definitely an argument that says, well, they're not professional designers and they shouldn't be let loose. But there are tools where you can, you know, that's why people love Canva. And Canva has like, I don't know, 125 million active users every month. It's almost twice the size of the UK in terms of its user base. It's, you know, there are demonstrable markets that say people want to create their own content, but make it easier for them to create their own content. And honestly, I don't think the tools we've got at the moment, I think when we look back in 3 years, we're not going to be here. I think
I certainly hope not.
the market drivers are too strong. You know, I think people complain about Wix, but actually Wix is quite complex to use.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm going to get sorted for this again, but Wix is quite a complex tool for a lot of people. It's too complex, you know. Whereas Canva, I urge everyone to go. I mean, I'm not advocating Canva at all, but go and check out their website builder. It's incredibly simple, and you can create quite nice designs quite easily.
Are they just charging some basic monthly fee?
They have they've done a deal with, so they've done all the domain name thing as well. So it's all very seamless with 2cows. So you buy your domain name through them, and then it's part of their Canva Pro package. So it's just a one pager. It's very simple, but you can knock out a one pager in about, I'm not advocating Canva, everyone, but you can knock out a one pager in about 15 minutes and it'll look okay. And it'll work on mobile, sort of. It'll be good enough for most people.
I would imagine the vast majority of local businesses it would be more than sufficient for.
Yeah.
Small brick and mortar or small service-based businesses.
Yeah. And, you know, Canva aren't stupid people.
There's a lot of money behind it, that's for sure.
Yeah. So I do think I think this market is not going to look like this market in 3 years' time. I think with all sorts of drivers, it's going to look very different.
So then with that in mind, if you're an agency owner,
yeah,
and you have maybe, let's say, one or two employees, maybe one or two contractors, you have 20, 30 care plan clients, and you get a few website projects a month. You are in that position. Where do you, as Jamie, the agency owner, focus your time? Maybe right now you use Bricks or you use GeneratePress. What does that evolution look like for you?
Well, I would approach it first from what's the business model for that business going forward, and then the tooling kind of. I wouldn't start with I'm going to start with the Bricks, and then I love Bricks. I would start with what's our business plan looking like over the next 3 years. Do we think this market that we're currently in is going to be, you know, the same, or is it going to be slightly more commodified? Is this stuff getting easier? Is the technology becoming easier? So I'd make those kind of, is our business model right? Are people still going to start wanting to pay for changes? Every little change we make, $150, is that really going to continue, or do we see that eroding? And then I'd make some decisions based on around that stuff, really. And then, you know, for me, it probably fits naturally that my business, just from a technology plan point of view, it falls more closely to core, because there's going to be some cool stuff coming along, which you'll be able to utilize. And then I'd probably say, you know, I don't know what your feeling of the agency market is at the moment, but it feels like it's been a tough year for a lot of people that I speak to.
For me, revenue was essentially right, you know, same as last year, just maybe by 5 or 10%. I managed to cut costs a good bit, so it feels like a better year. But yeah, there's definitely some background, you know, kind of niggles in my mind about like what comes next. What emphasis does the sales process need to have? Does it need to be more personalized and human focused? And I've never been one to lead with the tools. That's never even a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking at that, I mean, I don't know that for me necessarily it was I wouldn't consider it a bad year by any stretch, but I certainly didn't have the growth year over year that I've had in years past. So yeah, it's an interesting point to look at.
Yeah, and it's it's the old adage: get big, get niche, or get out, right? And
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of people, I guess, as well. So look at where you can really add value. Um, so it's going to be a really interesting few years. I think there's going to be a lot of friction, and a lot of people struggling would be my guess.
Well, I mean, a big concern that I would have as someone in the Bricks or Quickly or any of those kind of tools is what happened to Oxygen. I
Yeah.
was right there in the mix of all that when it went heads up, and
How were you? I didn't know that.
yeah.
Like,
So the the that did you ever see that live stream that went down?
I did.
The
No.
day that Breakdance got announced, I did a live stream, and the Lewis from SoFly came on, and it was a total shit show.
Okay, I'll go and check that. Is that still out there?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, yeah, I'll go and check that out.
It's definitely it's slightly legendary in that community.
Okay.
But my point is not to dredge up that, but to say that the way that I felt like my business was at risk with the snap of a finger
Yeah.
was like it was shocking, and I just realized like I can't be at the mercy of some hyper focused tool like this ever again. Like
Yeah.
I just
I mean,
can't.
you've got to, if anyone's that adamant about using a tool, you just say to them, do you know what the pricing model is going to be in 3 years? Do you know who's going to be owning it in 3 years? And if they go, no, well, then that's conversation over. Whereas you can't say that with WordPress. You've got your risk profile is massively reduced just by using WordPress in the first place. So, a lot of these conversations people get angry about, they're not looking at this sort of macro stuff properly, I think, from a risk point of view. Oxygen is still out there, though, right? It's still going.
Yeah, definitely.
Sort of.
It's of course it's lost its momentum, but from what I understand, they're still a sustainable business.
Yeah.
Just their trajectory was kind of continuing forward. But even prior to that kind of blow up, I had some internal doubts. Like, does this make sense to keep sort of moving forward with? And people like Kyle Van Duzen and my good buddy Taylor Drayson and a couple other people had already made the jump to generate blocks. So it's kind of in the back of my mind to get closer to core, just to be, like you said, reduce or increase or reduce the risk profile. Which way does it go? Increase. So
yeah,
that's a large part of the decision for me.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a company if you're basing your livelihood on a company run by 2 people for your cool tool, then, there's some risk. You've got to be aware of the risk around that. And there is obvious risk around that. You don't know what's going to happen.
It's also true of core, though, I guess, as well. Like you're putting your, I guess, trajectory in the hands of an organization that you kind of are out of touch with entirely. So that's my opinion of it. Is it feels like we've already said, it feels extremely impossible to have any say. It's almost like a lot of people's perception of politics. Oh, why get involved because I can't do anything individually? You have to have that grassroots swelling to really make any difference.
I can't pick up the phone and say I need responsive controls in Gutenberg tomorrow, Matthias. It's not gonna happen. But I can build a plugin that adds them. But it's about nuance in some of this stuff. Right, I'm sticking more closely to core in that way. Just like you use GeneratePress and generate blocks. Your risk profile is far smaller than if you're using Oxygen, because you're using kind of what's in core. So when collaboration comes along, if collaboration ever comes along, you can just if you ever need collaboration, I've never needed it, you can just switch it on, right? Or the next thing comes along, you just switch it on. So it's not like you're just getting this. You're riding the wave. Some of the wave is going to be bad for you, but most of it's you're going to get the goodness of it. That's my view on it, anyway.
I think it all comes back to risk tolerance and not forgetting that the person you're bad mouthing on the other end of the Facebook comment is a real human.
Yeah. Be nice to people.
Yeah.
It's only a page. It's a page builder.
Yeah, definitely. Nobody's holding a gun to your head that you have to continue loving XYZ tool.
Yeah. And if you really want to be a developer, don't use WordPress. You've got the HTML spec, you've got the CSS spec. Don't use WordPress and just, build it yourself.
Build it in React.
Yeah, and just build it. You don't need a content management system, a monolithic content management system. So don't get on the high horse. Uh, you're using WordPress.
At the end of the day, it's an abstraction layer on top of an extraction layer.
Yeah, exactly.
Very interesting. Well, Jamie, I know we're about an hour here, so I want to be respectful of your time. Where can anybody watching connect with you? Obviously, I'll put your links in the description.
Yeah, Twitter, PoodlePress, and YouTube. I think it's YouTube/WP Jamie.
Perfect.
Where you can find me. Thanks, man.
Pleasure. Good to chat with you.